The 2024 MLB Draft has an elite two-way player, an elite switch pitcher, some of the best power sensations in college history, and the most hyped Australian prospect ever. For the second straight season, the first round of the draft should be one of the most impactful of the decade. And for a second straight year, it's in stark contrast to the draft from one decade prior. I said the 2013 top 10 was terrible, but the 2014 first round might have been even worse. I classified each first round selection from 2014 into one of four categories: possible Hall of Famer, hit, meh, or bust. Out of 41 first rounders, I only considered 8 of them hits or better, and only 13 non-busts. And one draft strategy in particular was especially detrimental. While the first round of the draft technically includes the Compensation Round and Competitive Balance Round A, I'll only be covering the non-busts from those two sections. The only Competitive Balance Round pick to do anything at the major league level is Connor Joe, so he's the guy I'll be talking about first. Connor Joe isn't an especially great player either, but he's still a regular at the MLB level, and his personal story is more interesting than most. Joe was a very good contact hitting outfielder for University of San Diego, and the Pirates selected him with their second pick of the first round. He never really found his footing with the organization, and he was moved to Atlanta for Sean Rodriguez in 2017. He struggled so badly with the Braves organization that he was traded to the Dodgers just a few weeks later. Joe finally broke out in 2018, hitting well for both the AA and AAA affiliates, but the Dodgers kept him off their 40-man roster, so he was selected in the Rule 5 draft by the Reds. They traded him to the Giants, who cut him just 2 weeks into the 2019 season. Joe ended up back with the Dodgers AAA team, where he continued to hit well, but he couldn't crack the big league roster for the remainder of 2019. During his yearly physical in February of 2020, the Dodgers team doctor felt something odd. Later that week, it was discovered that he had testicular cancer. He had surgery to remove the tumor, but it was revealed that the cancer had spread to his lung. He underwent 4 rounds of chemotherapy, and by late July, he was declared cancer-free. He didn't play any baseball in 2020, and the Dodgers non-tendered him after the season. Joe had been traded 3 times, drafted twice, designated for assignment, non-tendered, and fought cancer, and all he had to show for it was a single major league hit. He was 28 years old, and his body was recovering from intensive chemotherapy, but his baseball journey wasn't done yet. The Rockies brought him in on a minor league contract, and this is how he responded.
This ball, speaking of long balls, deep center field. Connor Joe, welcome back to the big leagues. His first career homer.
It was only 63 games, but he had a near 850 OPS and slugged 8 homers. Joe was traded back to the Pirates after 2022, and he's been a consistent member of their lineup ever since. He doesn't bring much defensive value, and his offense is rather pedestrian, but overcoming all of his hurdles and contributing in any way is notable enough for me. He's a meh that I'll be rooting for the rest of his career. For our next player and our first hit, we have to skip ahead 5 spots in the draft to the Compensatory Round. Jack Flaherty is the only high schooler on this list who I'm calling a hit. As we'll come to see, so many of these teenage arms struggle with command or don't develop the stuff needed to miss MLB bats. Neither of these things were problems for Flaherty, who shot through the minors with almost no resistance. He debuted with the Cardinals at 21 in 2017, before joining their rotation for good the next year. Flair was great in his first full season, but he truly broke out in 2019. He threw nearly 200 innings, led the league in whip and hits per 9, and struck out over 10 batters per 9. Flaherty finished 4th in Cy Young voting at just 23 years old. He was the Cardinals' opening day starter in each of the next 2 seasons, but repeated injuries led to some disappointing results. They traded him to the Orioles midway through 2023, and he was dreadful in Baltimore, losing his spot in the rotation before the playoffs. The Tigers took a chance on him, signing him to a 1-year prove-it deal entering 2024, and prove it he has. Jack Flaherty is currently one of the best starters in MLB. He's finally healthy, and his strikeout-to-walk ratio is among the best in baseball. The Tigers will likely trade him to a contender for a haul later this month, and he'll probably sign a massive contract this offseason. Easy hit. Michael Kopech is another righty high school draft pick, and his minors career began similarly to Flaherty's. Kopech was excellent in the low minors with Boston before being traded to the White Sox as part of the Chris Sale deal. He rose to the top 10 on MLB Pipeline before 2018, and he debuted for the White Sox later that year. But in just his 4th MLB appearance, he tore his UCL, and went on to miss all of 2019 and 2020. He He spent most of 2021 in the bullpen, and he was pretty good, striking out over 13 batters per 9 and keeping his walks under control. When he moved to the rotation the next year, his command became a bit of an issue, and his strikeout numbers plummeted. 2023 was even worse, so the White Sox moved him back to the bullpen for 2024. He's continued to struggle so far this year, walking over 5 batters per 9 and getting hit pretty hard. Kopech still posts great strikeout numbers, and his fastball is as hard as ever, but he's throwing it 80% of the time, and he's hardly using the slider that made him effective in relief in 2021. A good team can definitely get something out of him, whether it's through that slider or adding a hard cutter, so I'm not writing him off for good quite yet, but it's unlikely he'll climb all the way into the hit category. Meh. Luke Weaver has been in Major League Baseball for the last 9 years, but he's just now finding some consistency for the first time in his career. His minor league numbers were absolutely ridiculous in 2015 and 2016, so he was recalled at just 22 years old. Weaver was a solid member of the Cardinals rotation for the second half of 2017 through 2018, but he was shipped off to Arizona in the Paul Goldschmidt trade. That deal ended up being a disaster for the D-backs, even after Weaver's hot start with his new club. Forearm, shoulder, and elbow injuries sent him to the 60-day injured list 3 times in 4 years, and he wasn't effective for Arizona after May of 2019. He had an ERA over 6 in both 2022 and 2023, pitching for 5 separate teams across those seasons. But the Yankees liked what they saw from him at the end of 2023, so they kept him around as rotation depth for 2024. Whatever pitching coach Matt Blake did for Weaver, it's working. He began the year in lower leverage mop-up appearances, but quickly climbed the ladder of trust in the Yankees bullpen. He's now their top setup man, and he has good numbers all around. He's using his cutter more than ever, and his fastball is getting more rise and velocity than ever. Because of his struggles in his 20s, Weaver can't be a hit, but this second life in his career definitely keeps him out of the bust category. Meh. Michael Chavis is the first bust of many that I'll be covering today. Buckle in, there's gonna be a lot of this. Chavis was Georgia's Gatorade Player of the Year as a senior in high school in 2014. The reigning champion Red Sox selected him as a shortstop, though he profiled more as a corner infielder. It took him a few years to adjust to pro ball, and strikeouts were definitely a concern, but by 2017, he was mashing. Chavis was suspended for the first half of 2018 for a positive PED test, but he hit well when he returned. He made his MLB debut in 2019, and he was pretty decent, homering 18 times in 95 games. His barrel rate and solid defense showed his high ceiling, but he could never keep his strikeout rate low enough to be truly effective. Ultimately, the Red Sox shipped him off to Pittsburgh in 2021, and he hasn't been able to keep a job long-term since 2022. It's very possible that he'll emerge somewhere as lineup depth, but he would need to seriously overhaul his swing to find another starting job. Bust. Matt Chapman went undrafted out of high school in 2011, but he got an immediate starting job at Cal State Fullerton. His college athlete personal bio makes me love him so much more than I ever would have imagined. But he not only had impeccable movie, musician, and actress taste, he was also a baller. Even though he hit just 13 homers in college, the A's must have seen the power potential. In his first full minor league season, he hit 23 homers, then 36 in 2016. By the second half of 2017, he was the A's everyday third baseman, and he could do it all. Chapman was immediately in the Arenado and Machado tier of hot corner defense, and he was hitting above league average as a rookie. In 2018 and 2019, he finished with over 7 BWAR, earned top 7 MVP finishes both seasons, won the AL Gold Glove at third base both seasons, and won the AL Platinum Glove both seasons, all while slugging 60 total homers. Chapman was a top 10 player in all of baseball during his 2-year peak. A serious hip surgery after 2020 nerfed his ability slightly, and his offense never really returned to his peak levels, but he's still a fantastic player. He was traded to the Jays in 2022, and he had one of the best months of the decade in April of 2023. Since joining the Giants this year in free agency, he's cut down his whiff and strikeout rates while maintaining excellent power. His defense at third isn't what it used to be, but he's still going to be worth around 4 WAR per year. He isn't quite on the Hall of Fame track, but if his career continues at this rate deep into his 30s, he might have an outside chance. Either way, he's one of the easiest hits on this list and definitely the second best position player of this first round. Cole Tucker has more riz than talent, and that's no dig, because he's still an incredibly talented ball player, just not talented enough to succeed at the major league level. He's never once had a professional season at any level with an OPS above 800. He's athletic, but he doesn't defend well. He has a good eye, but he whiffs a ton, and he doesn't hit for much power. The Pirates waived him in 2022, and he's only played in the majors for the Rockies and Angels since. He's a definite bust, but if he steps away from the game right now, he'll be living a better life than most of the guys on this list regardless. Derek Hill was drafted by the Tigers out of high school in 2014. He was still struggling in high A ball in 2018. Hill went on the injured list 7 times in his first 4 full minor league seasons, and it largely stalled his development. Despite struggling at Double A in 2019, he made his MLB debut in 2020 and got a little bit of run in 2021 and 2022, though neither stint was particularly successful. He signed with the Nationals in 2023, but he didn't do much at the big league level in DC. Before this season, Hill signed with the Rangers, and he absolutely tore up AAA. Hill was promoted to the defending world champs in May, DFA'd, re-signed, and recalled again in late June. He proceeded to hit 3 homers in 2 games versus the Orioles. He's definitely a bust, but Derek Hill has elite sprint speed, plays pretty good defense in center, and clearly has some type of pop. And I'll be watching to see if he can make something happen as a late bloomer. This Kenny Powers looking dude should not have such an interesting story, but here we are. Grant Holmes was drafted out of high school to the Dodgers. He had some good strikeout stuff, but allowed a lot of hits and walks once he got into the high minors. After being traded to the A's in 2016, he tore his rotator cuff in 2018, and his career was completely derailed. He pitched decently well in 2019, but he was moved to the bullpen after further injury issues and troubles going deep into games. With the minor leagues shut down in 2020, he didn't pitch at all, and when he returned in 2021, something wasn't right. His velocity was way down, and he was getting shelled. Holmes finished 2021 with an ERA above 8, and he was released in 2022 after somehow pitching even worse. But for whatever reason, the Braves saw something that they liked, so they signed him in hopes that he'd figure it out. And in 2023, Holmes regained his velocity on his fastball, and the results followed suit. He excelled as the Braves' AAA closer in 2023 and 2024. Ultimately culminating in his first MLB promotion a decade after being drafted. Although it's a small sample, his numbers right now look very impressive, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's found a long-term home in the Braves bullpen. He's still a bust as of right now, but he's another guy that I'll be keeping my eye on and rooting for. Bradley Zimmer's career directly contrasts the previous 2 players I've talked about. Zimmer was a very good college outfielder, and he progressed through Cleveland's minor league system quite quickly. He made his MLB debut in 2017, playing over 100 games for an excellent Indians team. He was a great base runner and good center field defender, but he fractured his hand in September and missed their playoff run. Zimmer began 2018 as the starting center fielder, but after 2 brutal months where he struck out nearly 40% of the time, he was demoted. Just a few weeks later, he was diagnosed with a torn labrum, which kept him out of the rest of 2018 and most of 2019. Zimmer homered off his brother Kyle in 2021, but he didn't do much more for Cleveland before they traded him. His strikeout rate was so out of control that he wasn't even worth playing, even as a great center field defender. He got chances with the Jays, then the Phillies, then the Jays in 2022, but it was much of the same. He hasn't played pro ball this far in 2024, and his career might be over. Guys like Hill and Holmes never had a regular roster spot in the majors until right now. Zimmer had chances for 6 seasons, and his career is in a worse spot than both of theirs today. This isn't a knock on him, it just goes to show how unique this sport is. All 3 of these guys were drafted just minutes apart, but their careers have gone in totally different directions. Unfortunately, Zimmer, just like the other 2, still needs to be considered a bust. Casey Gillespie's older brother Connor had a 10-year career in MLB, but while Connor made his MLB debut the year he was drafted, Casey never once appeared in a big league game. Just like his brother, Casey was a superstar at Wichita State, hitting nearly 400 with an OPS above 1200 during his junior year, and his first 3 seasons in the minors were excellent. He hit at every level, including a 163 WRC plus in AAA in 2016. So how is it that this guy never made it? I think the Rays could tell that his strong 2016 was largely propelled by a high average on balls in play. They traded him to the White Sox midway through 2017. Gillespie never had high minor success again, and the White Sox released him after a poor showing in 2018. He played indie ball through 2022, and it seems like his baseball career is over. Bust. Nick Howard was the first of 3 UVA players to go in the first round of this draft. He was also the first of 3 busts. Despite finding his success out of the bullpen for the Cavaliers, the Reds drafted Howard and tried using him as a starter. He had some good stuff, but he walked as many batters as he struck out. Even when he moved back to the bullpen, his command was a disaster. Across 2015 and 2016, Howard pitched 58 innings, walking 81 batters, hitting 6, and throwing 22 wild pitches in that time span. He had the yips. There was no other way to put it, and then he hurt his shoulder and missed all of 2017. Even then, he was still able to make it all the way to AAA by 2021, but walked over a quarter of the batters he faced there. He hasn't pitched since last July, and his career is likely done. Bust. Erick Fedde has one of the most interesting careers on this list. If I made this video last year, he'd be considered a bust without even a second thought. Fedde had an excellent career at UNLV, then shot through the minors with the Nationals, but across over 450 innings in 6 seasons in DC, he had an ERA well over 5. And 2022 was particularly dreadful. His walk rate rose, and he had one of the worst strikeout rates in baseball. The Nats had seen enough, and they non-tendered him after the season. This would be it for a lot of guys. 0.3 BWAR and a 5.40 ERA, with nothing under the hood trending positively. Now 30, Fedde took his talents to the Far East, signing with the NC Dinos of the KBO. What came next caught everyone off guard. Fedde won 20 games, kept a 2.00 ERA, struck out over 200 batters, and won the league's Triple Crown, Cy Young equivalent, and MVP all in one season. He signed with the White Sox before 2024, and he's been excellent so far. Replacing his curveball with a sweeper and keeping his walks in check have improved almost every facet of his game. He's not a dominant pitcher or an ace, but he strikes out enough batters and limits his hard contact. With the White Sox being as bad as they are, I wouldn't be surprised if Fedde is pitching for a contender by August. 2 years after being released by the Nationals, he could be a Game 1 or 2 starter for a playoff team. Since 2024 is his first good MLB season, I can't call him a hit, but he's currently one of the best players on this list. His triumphant return has been an excellent storyline in an otherwise dreadful Southside season. As I mentioned earlier, 11 2014 first-rounders never even made the bigs. Brandon Finnegan achieved something over a quarter of this list never did just 3 months after the draft. Finnegan joined one of the most dominant bullpens of the modern era after just 27 minor league innings, and the Royals threw him right into the fire. He started the 10th inning of the AL wildcard game against the A's, setting down the side in order in front of a raucous home crowd. And it was more of the same in the 11th. He was a key piece of one of the greatest playoff games I've ever watched, and it was just his 21st professional appearance. On October 24th, he did something that nobody had ever done before. Finnegan appeared in a World Series game the same year he pitched in the College World Series. He picked up the hold in Game 3, but succumbed to some brutal luck to take the Game 4 loss. Even though Finnegan lost that game when the Royals lost the series, it looked like it was just the beginning for him. But as it turned out, his biggest MLB moments all came in those first few months. Finnegan was the key piece of the Johnny Cueto trade at the 2015 trade deadline. The Reds opted to develop him as a starter, and he had a pretty good season in 2016, but a shoulder injury kept him out of action for most of 2017. When he returned, his fastball lost a few ticks and his command was a mess. He never made a major league appearance after turning 26. If the one healthy start he made in 2017 is any indication, Finnegan was about to break out before hurting his shoulder. 7 innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts, and no runs. But excellence in this game is both fragile and non-linear. A long, successful career wasn't in the cards for Finnegan, but at least he had a few of those big moments that most players on this list only ever dreamed of. Relative to most of the high schoolers taken in this round, Touki Toussaint's career has gone pretty well. He struggled with his command as a teenager, but he developed pretty well after being traded to the Braves. Toussaint made his MLB debut at age 22, and he's pitched in parts of 6 MLB seasons, but that doesn't make him any less of a bust. He never found a role with the Braves, and he's bounced around the league ever since leaving the organization. He's currently pitching in AAA for the White Sox. Toussaint doesn't get hit too hard, and he strikes out enough batters to be effective, but he's consistently finished with a walk rate near the bottom of the league. If he can improve his command, he can and will be effective, but it's been a decade with this problem now, so don't hold your breath. Sean Newcomb was Toussaint's teammate for 4 years in Atlanta, and their careers aren't too dissimilar. The main difference is that Newcomb was an effective starter for his first year and a half. He looked like a potential ace through July of 2018, taking a no-hitter into the 9th inning versus the Dodgers, but he struggled mightily the rest of the way. He bounced between the Braves' rotation, bullpen, and AAA roster over the next few years, and just like Toussaint, he never got the walks under control. He threw his fastball over 60% of the time at his best, so when his velocity declined, he really didn't have much else to fall back on. He was just DFA'd by the A's at the time I'm writing this video, and his best years are long behind him. Another bust. Tyler Beede has failed to execute his Eric Fedde arc so far. He too had an ERA over 5 across a few major league seasons entering 2023, and Beede also traveled to the Far East, signing with the Yomiuri Giants of MPB, but he failed to dominate his new league the way Fedde did. He put up rather pedestrian numbers, mostly as a reliever. That didn't deter the Guardians from giving him a shot, but the experiment has failed thus far. He strikes batters out, but he also gets hit pretty hard, and he walks a ton. He's currently in AAA, and I don't see any future for him in this league. Bust.
The San Diego Padres select Trea Turner.
Trea Turner would be our first hit in 12 spots, if only he weren't so good.
0-2. Turner to left field and deep. Peralta back. It is gone. Turner hits a drive deep left center field, and the Phillies strike first again. Turner to center. Did he get it? Yes, he did. Game over!
Trea is the first of 2 players I'm putting in my possible Hall of Fame tier. I don't think he's a lock, but if Turner continues on his current path, he will get serious consideration for Cooperstown, and I think he's a tier above the other hits on this list. Turner was NC State's superstar shortstop, swiping bags, hitting bombs, and playing good defense. The Padres liked his all-around skill set, so they picked him 13th overall. Then, things got weird. Turner struggled in low A, but then mashed in high A in 2014. I'm not sure if his low A stint spooked the Padres, but they traded him as part of the Will Myers 3-team deal in November. The catch was that he wasn't yet eligible to be traded. Turner had to begin 2015 playing for the Padres system, knowing that he was about to be traded as the player to be named later in June. And I have to imagine the Padres regretted the trade more and more as Trea mashed at AA. He made his major league debut with the Nationals later that year. With both middle infield positions occupied, Turner got some experience in center field in 2016, and he was the Nationals' starting center fielder for most of the second half. He missed some time in 2017, but he played all 162 in 2018. With Bryce Harper on his way out, the Nationals became Turner's, Anthony Rendon's, and Juan Soto's team. Turner was establishing himself as one of the better shortstops in MLB, and his elite speed made him both dynamic and highlight-worthy. 2019 was a continuation of the norm he'd established for himself. The Cinderella Nationals made a miracle run at the World Series, and Turner was their leadoff bat and starting shortstop. Even though he struggled during the 2019 postseason, the Nationals still won their franchise first World Series, and Turner only got better from there. He had a fantastic 2020, and kept it going in 2021. Even as his team started to fail. The Nats shipped him off to the Dodgers, where he played a great year and a half for LA before signing a monster contract with the Phillies. Turner had a fantastic 2023 WBC for Team USA, but he started his first season with Phillies slowly. Entering August 4th, Turner had a .656 OPS and was coming off a brutal road trip. But instead of greeting him with boos or throwing snowballs or batteries at him, the Philadelphia fans did something special. They gave Trea Turner a standing ovation, and just like magic, Turner went on a tear, matching 16 homers, swiping 9 out of 9 bags, and finishing the year with an OPS above 1,000 after the ovation. He's continued his great hitting so far in 2024, but his defense has taken a few steps back. I'm not sure how long he gets to get short, but even if he moves to second midway through the contract, he'll continue to be incredibly valuable as long as he's hitting like this. If everything goes well, he'll be getting the call from Cooperstown sometime after he retires. Regardless, he's been the undisputed best player in this draft class so far. Let's meet the man drafted right before the potential Hall of Fame shortstop. Cody Medeiros was probably the best baseball player in the state of Hawaii as a senior in high school. He was a great contact hitter, but more importantly, he was an elite left-handed pitcher. Medeiros touched the mid-90s with his fastball and threw a big sweeping curve. He touched 97 with his fastball during a workout for the Brewers, so they couldn't resist. In the minors, he limited hard contact, never allowing many homers, but he walked a ton of batters. After a solid start in Double-A in 2018, the Brewers shipped him to the South Side in what turned out to be a great sell-high move. In 3 years with the White Sox farm, he had an ERA over 5 and never walked under 5 batters per 9. A shift to the bullpen didn't help him. He retired from baseball in 2023. Another high school pitcher, another bust. The high school picks in this draft class are a cautionary tale of the risks that come with drafting teenagers. Out of the 20 high school picks, only 2 are a meh or higher, those being Flaherty and Kopech. That's 18 busts, 7 of whom never made the bigs. Max Pentecost has the honors of proving that college players too can be busts. But it wasn't for lack of effort that Pentecost fell short. His 2014 season was cut short with a broken wrist. He missed what was supposed to be his first full professional season with a shoulder injury in 2015. When he returned, he never once played 90 games in the season. Even after finishing off 2018 very strongly at Double-A, Pentecost retired after spring of 2019. His body flat out failed him. His biggest asset coming out of Kennesaw State was his catching ability, and durability is more important than any other trait when it comes to catching. For whatever reason, it wasn't meant to be. Bust. Before we get to the top 10, if you're enjoying the video, please subscribe. Over 90% of you aren't subscribed. It's free, only takes a click, helps me out a ton, and you won't miss my future uploads. And for our number 10 player, I'll throw it to my special guest, Mike from Stark Raving Sports.
You know, as an Italian Mets fan named Michael, you'd think I'd be all over Michael Conforto. And when he started making an impact in the big leagues just over a year after he was drafted, I absolutely was.
Fly ball into right. Will this carry? He has got another.
Conforto was one of the fastest players from this class to make it to the big leagues, and also one of the first to really pan out. I remember thinking the timing of when he made it up was crazy. They called him up from Double-A with 3 fewer non-Arizona Fall League minor league games than Bryce Harper had. They also made him the 1,000th Met ever, which I think is pretty cool. Conforto played well in his first taste of big league action, culminating in a 2-homer game in Game 4 of the 2015 World Series. His true breakout came in 2017, when he made the NL All-Star team, clocked in at 48% above league average offensively, and was on a 40-homer pace over a full season. That was until he dislocated his shoulder, swinging, during a real game. He made it back in time to play a full season in 2018, and not long after, became one of the very best outfielders in the National League for a few years. If 2020 wasn't a 60-game season, he probably would have been a 2-time All-Star, and the 2020 Mets probably would have made the playoffs, but that's just me. A mixture of injuries and regression hit him hard in 2021, leaving a sour taste in everyone's mouths when he hit free agency. After years of talk about what kind of 9-figure contract he'd rake in, he missed all of 2022 unemployed as he suffered another shoulder injury training while a free agent. The Giants brought him in on a 2-year, $36 million deal before 2023, where he's been roughly a league average outfielder with them, and a shell of his former self. It is pretty sad how underrated he was and will go down as. Conforto says he has no regrets about his time with the Mets, and the way he played he absolutely shouldn't. His time with them was one of the most successful any player had for any team in this class.
Jeff Hoffman falls into the Luke Weaver and Eric Fetty group of mess. He would have been a clear bust a year or two ago, but his career has found a second life in his 30s. Hoffman barely played for the team who drafted him, as the Blue Jays traded him to Colorado for Troy Tulowitzki hardly a year after this draft. He had no trouble making the big league club with the Rockies. The problem was that when he did, he had to pitch in Coors.
And the curveball rocketed to left field. Forget that.
High opposing BABIPs, high home run rates, and frequent injuries could all be linked back just to that. Hoffman never succeeded in Colorado, and his velocity dipped a few ticks in his mid-20s. He moved to the bullpen in 2020, had his worst year yet, and was traded to Cincinnati for Robert Stevenson, who ended up on a similar career path. He wasn't too bad as a Red, but he wasn't good enough for the team to tender him a contract after 2022. The Twins invited him to spring training in 2023, but he failed to make make the roster, so the Phillies picked him up for a pittance. Since joining Philadelphia's bullpen in May of 2023, he's suddenly emerged as one of the best right-handed relievers in Major League Baseball. He's sitting at 97 with his fastball, throwing his devastating slider nearly half the time, and features a nasty splitter to deal with lefties. The Phillies wouldn't be this good without his contributions, and he should get a nice payday during this coming offseason. Lord knows he's earned it. Kyle Freeland is pretty bad right now. He hasn't been good in quite a while. Come to think of it, he was only really great for one season, so how can he be considered a hit? Quite frankly, looking at it this way, it's a tough sell, but there are a few factors in this decision. This is a weak class, so the bar is pretty low. Freeland has been a Rocky his whole career, and in over 500 innings away from cores, he has a 4.25 ERA. That's not crazy good, but it's pretty damn valuable. He's like Jason Vargas playing his career on extra hard difficulty, but the main factor in rating him this high is his 2018 season. Kyle Freeland's 2018 would be the best season for all but one pitcher on this list. He threw over 200 innings, finished with a sub-3 ERA, and earned a 4th place Cy Young finish. He also shoved in the wildcard game against the Cubs. Now, the underlying numbers aren't quite as good as his ERA suggested, but he was still excellent regardless. Nagging elbow, shoulder, oblique, groin, and blister issues have handicapped him since his peak season, but he still produced decently well considering his circumstances. He's currently battling with teammate German Marquez to go down as the greatest starter in Rockies history, so I think he's worthy to be called a hit. Everyone knows that Aaron Nola is great. Everyone knows that Aaron Nola is durable, but I don't think people realize just how great and durable he is. He hasn't missed multiple starts in a season since May of 2017. Corey Kluber was the best pitcher in MLB the last time this guy was seriously hurt. Nola doesn't walk anyone, and he strikes out a lot of guys, consistently appearing near the top of the strikeout minus walk rate leaderboards. His 2018 would have been Cy Young worthy in most seasons not dominated by peak DeGrom. He also finished 4th in Cy Young voting in 2022. I think he's a lot closer to Garrett Cole than people realize. Since 2017, their stats are very similar both in terms of volume and efficiency. Nola has a very sneaky Hall of Fame case brewing, and even as his stuff declines, he should continue producing on the basis of volume and command into his mid-30s. If he can be great for the majority of this contract, he'll probably get the call from Cooperstown someday. Alex Jackson is pretty cool. He was drafted as an outfielder out of high school, but the Mariners pretty quickly realized that he couldn't hit well enough to play in the corner outfield or defend well enough to play center. He never surpassed A-ball for Seattle, being traded to the Braves before 2017. In Atlanta's system, he moved behind the plate, where he hadn't played since high school. Catcher isn't the optimal position to relearn on the fly, but Jackson did. Jackson isn't the best catcher in the world, but his availability at the position gave him just enough of a boost to make the big league roster. He served as a backup catcher for the Braves, Marlins, Brewers, and currently the Rays. While he's hit well at AAA, the bat has yet to come around at the highest level, and it's unlikely that it ever will. But even though the value that he's brought has been limited, and even though I consider him a bust, Jackson's grit has led him to continued roles with MLB teams. A lesser man would have given up this dream long ago. Nick Gordon is the son of Tom Gordon and the brother of Dee Strange Gordon, and he's, interesting.
What is the wildest take that you wholeheartedly believe in?
The moon ain't real.
The moon isn't real?
The moon isn't real, and I don't have time to explain all of that.
If I made this video after 2022, I think I would have been a little bit more optimistic about his career. The Twins didn't rush him through the minors, making sure he conquered every level of pro play before MLB. He broke out in 2022, displaying pretty solid power. He's not the same type of player as D. He doesn't have elite speed or play a premium position on defense. Nick needs to hit for power to succeed, but in 2023, he took a new approach, whiffing and striking out a lot less. This led to a ton of bad contact and nosediving results. He broke his fibula in May of that year, and was traded to the Marlins the following offseason. It took a trade to Miami for his brother to break out. Evidently, Nick is not his brother. He's chasing a ton, making a ton of weak contact, and even the whiffs have returned. Unless he rediscovers some of that 2022 power that made him valuable, I can't see him sticking in MLB lineups much longer. Bust. Kyle Schwarber's career is one of the most interesting on this list. The slugging catcher from Indiana shot through the minors in just a year, breaking out along with the young Cubs core in 2015. Although they fell short of a pennant, it was clear that something special was brewing for 2016. That is, until the second game of the season.
Schwarber, Fowler, and neither can catch it. I hope they're all right. Schwarber's injured. The biggest concern right now for the Cubs is Kyle Schwarber. He is in major pain.
Schwarber tore his ACL and LCL in a collision in the outfield, and he was ruled out for the year. The Cubs kept winning, and rumors swirled about whether Schwarber would be traded for a piece that could help the team win now. But the deadline came and went, and Schwarber remained a Cub, and behind the scenes, he was working hard. The Cubs made the playoffs, winning their NLDS matchup. Schwarber returned to the field in the Arizona Fall League. The Cubs beat the Dodgers in the NLCS, and with the Interleague World Series on the way, they added Schwarber to the roster to DH during road games. And in Game 1 of the World Series, he returned in a huge way.
He flies one into right, back at the track. It is off the wall.
He put up monster numbers during the World Series, helping his team to their first world title in over 100 years. 6 months is a funny time frame. It's extraordinarily short for torn ACL recovery, but also an extraordinarily long time to go without seeing live pitching. And he successfully made his return on the largest stage of them all. If this was all Schwarber ever did in the bigs, his story would have been remembered forever. But he's gone on to establish himself as one of the best sluggers in the league. He barely caught after hurting his knee, turning into more of an Adam Dunn-like left fielder. Since 2018, he's hit 25% above league average and averaged over 40 homers per full season. After a rough 2020, the Cubs shockingly non-tendered him. The Nats picked him up, he balled out, and he was traded to Boston at the deadline. He helped the Sox go on a surprise playoff run before joining Philly, where he's been a key piece of their lineup for the last 3 seasons. Schwarber's having another excellent season right now, and he should continue to succeed as long as he's got his elite pop. Could 400 or even 500 homers be in his future? Only time will tell. Easy hit. Carlos Rodon's career began similarly to a few other starters on this list. He only made 8 minor league starts before debuting, but once he was with the White Sox, he was about league average for 4 seasons. He had a decent strikeout rate, but walked nearly 4 batters per 9 and allowed a few too many homers. Rodon then missed most of 2019 and 2020 with Tommy John surgery. Entering 2021, Rodon's career was hanging in the balance. The White Sox non-tendered him and then re-signed him before the season. The expectations weren't really there, but in 2021, he finally displayed the reason he was drafted so high. Rodon threw a no-hitter in April, earned an All-Star nod in July, and finished 5th in Cy Young voting. He completely dropped his sinker, which led to fewer ground balls, but also a lot more whiffs. There were still concerns about his durability, as he only threw 132 innings, and he hadn't thrown more than that since 2016. So Rodon took a short-term deal with the Giants, and he proved that 2021 wasn't a fluke. In 2022, he threw 178 innings, led the league in FIP and strikeout rate, and finished 6th in Cy Young voting. Rodon opted out of his deal and signed a 9-figure contract with the Yankees. He struggled with his health in 2023 and hasn't been nearly as effective since putting on the pinstripes. His home run rate has ballooned, he's getting hit a lot harder, and he's not missing as many bats. Rodon's stuff plus is similar to his peak seasons, but his location and pitch sequencing have been regressing badly. I still think he could be a good pitcher, but he's probably never going to reach his 2021 to 2022 peak again. Regardless of what's coming next, he's still done enough during his career to be considered an easy hit. Tyler Kolek just went 34th overall to the New York Knicks in the NBA Draft. 10 years ago, a likely more literate Tyler Kolek went 2nd overall to the Miami Marlins. I'm gonna spoil this now. He and our first overall pick were both starters out of high school, and neither made it beyond A-ball. Kolek was part of the reason why this draft is so dreadful, but at the same time, I get why the Marlins were so high on him. He was touching 102 miles per hour as an 18-year-old. There weren't any other prep prospects in the country touching triple digits at the time, so 102 was the number when discussing Kolek. He was a big, hulking Texan with triple digits in the tank, and that drew some Nolan Ryan comparisons, even from Nolan Ryan himself. But once he hit pro ball, it was clear that he was a bit of a one-trick pony. Kolek struggled to strike batters out at even the lower levels, and his walk rate was concerning. His slider was his best secondary, but it never developed into a big league caliber pitch. His curve was a non-factor, and he never really added a changeup, so he was mostly relying on the fastball. which was still fast but didn't possess a good enough movement profile. After tearing his UCL in 2016, Kolek only threw 33 more professional innings, allowing 40 runs in the process. While Kolek was advanced physically for his age, I don't think he would have been this highly touted by today's standards. Triple digits are great, but he was clearly a big fish in a small pond in high school. His repertoire lacked depth, and that should have been apparent even at the peak of his hype. It was exposed once he faced some real competition. His younger brother Steven, who was drafted in the 11th round out of Texas A&M in 2018, is actually pitching for the Padres bullpen today. I doubt anyone thought he'd have the more successful pro career a decade ago. Bust. Brady Aiken might be the single biggest draft bust of all time. He went first overall as a polished lefty prep prospect who, unlike Kolek, was considered more pro-ready. But a post-draft physical revealed concerning elbow inflammation, which led to the Astros withdrawing their initial offer and instead offering about half as much. They eventually raised their offer back to about $5 million, but Aiken declined to sign for $1.5 million less than he felt he deserved. He was the first overall pick to not sign in over 3 decades, opting instead to enroll in IMG Academy and re-enter the draft in 2015. As it turns out, the Astros were onto something, as Aiken tore his UCL during the first inning of his IMG career. Cleveland drafted him 17th overall in 2015, despite his injury, and signed him for $2.5 million. He struggled in his only full professional season in 2017, walking more batters than he struck out in A-ball. Aiken sat in the mid-90s in high school, but his velo was down ever since his surgery. That gift never returned, and Aiken only made 2 more appearances in 2019 before walking away from the game for good. But the Aiken selection wasn't all bad. Because he didn't sign, the Astros were granted a compensation pick in 2015. With that pick, they selected Alex Bregman, who helped the Astros more than nearly any draft pick in this class would have.
There it goes. He's back. Game tied.
Of all the drafts in MLB history, the 2014 draft was certainly one of them. As of mid-season 2024, only 8 of the 41 first-round selections accumulated double-digit WAR in their careers, and only 13 accumulated over 3 WAR. 11 never even made the bigs, including the top 2 overall picks. It's the only draft class in MLB history where neither of the top 2 picks made it. Despite Kolek's failure, right-handed pitching was the most successful position, as 6 busts and 6 non-busts were selected. Only 2 third basemen were picked, but one of them was Matt Chapman, so it technically has a 50% hit rate. The Phillies currently roster both Hall of Fame tier players as well as a hit and a meh, making them one of the few beneficiaries of this round. Let me know your thoughts on this list in the comments below, especially if you disagree with any of my rankings. And a special shout out to my first 2 channel members, I Love Misty 1985 and Tony Ferrona, who are watching this video a day before the rest of you nerds. You can become a channel member by hitting the join button down below for just $4 a month for early video access as well as behind the scenes updates. Thanks so much for watching.